am 32 female, absolutely gutted and need advice. Last month, I found a hidden plane ticket stub in my husband's 35 male suitcase from one of his business trips to Chicago, except his company confirmed he hasn't had any work travel in months. Digging deeper, I discovered emails on his laptop revealing he's been visiting his secret girlfriend, 28 female, in another state for over a year. The real kicker. She's now pregnant and sent him an ultrasound photo, which I found in his deleted files. We've been married for 7 years, trying for a baby ourselves, and now I'm shattered, stuck between confronting him and just walking away from this betrayal. How do I even process T? The suitcase sat in the corner of their bedroom like an accusation. Sarah hadn't meant to touch it. She'd only been looking for an extra blanket, the kind Mark always stuffed into the bottom of his carry-on when he packed for his business trips. The air in their suburban Chicago home was crisp that October evening, the kind of chill that crept through the windows despite the furnace humming. Their bedroom, with its soft gray walls and framed photos of their 7-year marriage, felt like a sanctuary, or it had until now. Sarah knelt beside the suitcase, her fingers brushing the worn leather handle. Mark had returned from his latest trip 2 days ago, a supposed conference in Dallas. He'd been his usual charming self when he walked through the door, tossing his jacket over the couch, kissing her forehead with a tired smile. "Missed you, babe," he'd said, his voice warm, familiar. But something had felt off. Maybe it was the way he'd avoided her eyes when she asked about the conference, or how he'd clutched his phone a little tighter when it buzzed. Small things, but they'd been piling up for months. She unzipped the suitcase, telling herself she was being ridiculous. Mark was her rock, her partner through late-night talks, fertility appointments, and the quiet ache of their shared dream to start a family. They'd been trying for a baby for 3 years, weathering ovulation tests, doctor visits, and the crushing disappointment of negative pregnancy tests. He wouldn't betray her. Not Mark, with his crooked grin and the way he still brought her coffee in bed every Sunday. The blanket was there, folded neatly at the bottom, but as she tugged it free, something else caught her eye. A crumpled piece of paper wedged between the suitcase's lining and a pair of Mark's socks. Her heart gave a strange lurch, like a car stalling on a quiet road. She reached for it, her fingers trembling, and smoothed it out. Plane ticket stub. Chicago to Denver, dated 3 weeks ago. Round trip, 1 passenger, Mark Thompson. Sarah frowned, her pulse quickening. Mark hadn't mentioned Denver. He'd told her he was in Seattle that week, some tech conference his company sent him to every few months. She could still hear his voice, casual over dinner. Same old, same old. Boring presentations, bad coffee. She'd laughed, teased him about sneaking out to explore the city, and he'd winked, promising to take her there someday. But Denver. She stared at the stub, the printed letters blurring as her mind raced. Maybe it was a layover or a last-minute change in plans. There had to be an explanation. She tucked the stub into her pocket and stood, the blanket forgotten. The bedroom felt smaller now, the air heavier. The photos on the dresser, Mark and Sarah laughing at their wedding, their honeymoon in Cancun, a selfie from last year's camping trip, seemed to watch her, judging her for what she was about to do. She glanced at the clock. 8:47 p.m. Mark was at the gym, or so he'd said. His duffel bag slung over his shoulder as he kissed her goodbye an hour ago. Won't be long, he'd promised, but his phone had buzzed as he walked out, and he'd silenced it with a quick glance. Sarah's stomach churned. She wasn't this person, the paranoid wife who snooped, who doubted her husband. But the ticket stub burned in her pocket, a splinter she couldn't ignore. She crossed the hall to the home office, where Mark's laptop sat on the desk, its sleek silver lid reflecting the dim light of the desk lamp. Her fingers hovered over it, guilt prickling her skin. This was a line she'd never crossed. Mark trusted her, just as she trusted him. Or had until tonight. She opened the laptop, the screen flickering to life with a photo of them at Navy Pier, arms around each other, the Ferris wheel glowing behind them. The password prompt stared back at her. She typed in Sunflower 23, the pet name he'd given her when they started dating, paired with their anniversary. The screen unlocked, and her breath caught. She was in. Her hands shook as she opened his email, scanning the inbox for anything unusual. Work emails, spam, a few messages from his brother about fantasy football. Nothing out of the ordinary. She exhaled, almost relieved, but then she noticed a folder labeled Archive. It was tucked away in the sidebar, easy to miss. She clicked it, her heart pounding. The folder was empty. Too empty, like it had been deliberately cleared. But then she checked the sent folder, and there it was. A single email sent 3 weeks ago, to an address she didn't recognize. lilamartin92@gmail.com. The subject line was blank. Sarah clicked, her mouth dry. The email was short, casual, but it hit her like a punch to the gut. Missed you already. Can't wait for next time. Denver was perfect. No signature, just those words, intimate and unguarded. She scrolled down, finding more emails in the thread. Dozens of them, stretching back over a year. Her vision blurred as she read snippets. You make me feel alive. Wish I could stay longer. Sarah's working late, come over? Each one was a knife, slicing through the life she thought she knew. She leaned back in the chair, her breath shallow. The office smelled faintly of Mark's cologne, the same cedarwood scent she'd bought him for Christmas. It clung to everything. The couch where they'd binge-watched shows, the bookshelf filled with their shared collection of novels. She wanted to scream, to throw the laptop across the room, but instead she sat frozen, the ticket stub heavy in her pocket. Who was Lila Martin? And why was Mark Fader writing to her, planning secret trips to Denver? Sarah's mind spiraled back to the past year. Mark's late nights, his sudden need for space after work, the way he'd started locking his phone. She'd chalked it up to stress. His job was demanding, and their fertility struggles had strained them both. But now the pieces clicked into place, each one a fresh wound. A gym. Was he even there now? Or was he with her? She forced herself to keep reading, each email a deeper betrayal. One mentioned a hotel in Denver, another a quiet dinner by a lake. Lila's responses were playful, affectionate. You owe me a rematch at minigolf. Can you sneak away this weekend? Sarah's chest tightened, her breaths coming in sharp gasps. She clicked on a photo attachment, her heart in her throat. A woman, young and smiling, with auburn hair and bright green eyes, stood beside Mark in a selfie. His arm was around her, his grin wide and unguarded. The caption read, "Best date ever." Sarah slammed the laptop shut, her hands shaking. The room spun, the walls closing in. She stumbled to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and drank it in gulps, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside her. The clock ticked past 9:30 p.m. Mark would be home soon. What was she supposed to do? Confront him? Pretend she hadn't seen anything? The ticket stub was still in her pocket, a tangible piece of his lie. She pulled it out, staring at the date, the flight number, the truth she couldn't unsee. She thought of their wedding day, Mark's vows whispered against her cheek. You're my everything, sunflower. They'd dance to Etta James under fairy lights, dreaming of a future filled with kids and road trips and lazy Sunday mornings. They'd been through so much together. Her miscarriage 2 years ago, the endless fertility treatments, the quiet nights holding each other when hope felt out of reach. How could he do this? How long had he been living this other life? The front door clicked open, and Sarah's heart stopped. Babe! Mark's voice called from the foyer, casual, warm. You up? She shoved the ticket stub back into her pocket and wiped her face, realizing only now that tears had streaked her cheeks. She couldn't face him, not yet. She needed answers, more than what the emails and a single photo could give her. She needed to know who Lila was, how deep this went, and whether her marriage was a lie. I'm in the kitchen, she called, her voice steady despite the chaos inside her. She heard his footsteps, the familiar creak of the floorboards, and then he was there, leaning against the doorway in his gym clothes. His dark hair damp with sweat, his smile easy. Tweezy. Rough day? He asked, grabbing a beer from the fridge. His eyes flicked to her, and for a moment she thought she saw a flicker of unease. Or was she imagining it? Just tired, she said, forcing a smile. Her hands clenched in her lap, the ticket stub burning against her thigh. She needed time to think, to plan her next move. But one thing was certain. The man standing before her, the man she'd loved for a decade, wasn't who she thought he was. As Mark rambled about his workout, Sarah's mind raced. She'd call his company tomorrow, confirm the Seattle trip was a lie. She'd dig deeper into the emails, maybe even track down Lila Martin. She'd find the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Because the alternative, living in the dark, was no longer an option. The glow of Mark's laptop cast a cold blue light across the home office, turning the familiar space into something alien. Sarah sat hunched in the desk chair, her hands trembling as she scrolled through the email she'd found last night. The plane ticket stub to Denver was still in her pocket, a sharp-edged reminder of the cracks splitting her world apart. It was 10:23 p.m. now, and Mark was asleep in their bed down the hall, his soft snores carrying faintly through the closed door. She'd lied to him after dinner, claiming she had work to finish, just to buy herself time alone with his secrets. The office smelled of old books and the lavender candle she'd lit to calm her nerves, but nothing could soothe the storm inside her. The emails between Mark and Lila.martin92@gmail.com filled the screen, each one a fresh wound. She'd read the first few last night before slamming the laptop shut, too overwhelmed to continue. But tonight she needed answers. Who was this woman? How long had this been going on? And how had she, Sarah, missed it? She clicked on an email dated 6 months ago, her heart thudding against her ribs. "Can't stop thinking about you," Mark had written. "Last weekend was everything. When can I see you again?" Lila's reply was playful, intimate. "You're making it hard to focus on work, you know. How about next month? I'll book that little cabin we talked about." Sarah's stomach twisted. Cabin. Weekend getaways. While she'd been charting ovulation cycles and crying over negative pregnancy tests, Mark had been planning escapes with someone else. She scrolled further, each email peeling back another layer of her husband's betrayal. Lila was Lila Martin, a 28-year-old graphic designer based in Denver, not Chicago as Sarah had first assumed. The emails mentioned her work, freelance projects, a recent art show, a logo she'd designed for a local brewery. Mark's replies were full of admiration. "You're so talented, Lila. I'm proud of you." Sarah's throat tightened. He used to say those words to her, back when she'd stay up late sketching ideas for her own graphic design side hustle, before their fertility struggles consumed her energy. She clicked on an attachment, her breath catching. A photo loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, revealing Lila's face. She was younger than Sarah, with auburn hair cascading over her shoulders, green eyes sparkling in the sunlight. She stood on a hiking trail, wearing a flannel shirt and a wide smile, the Rocky Mountains stretching behind her. Mark was beside her, his arm slung around her waist, his grin as bright as it had been in their wedding photos. The caption read, "Best hike yet. You're my favorite adventure." Sarah's vision blurred with tears. She pushed the laptop away, pressing her palms to her eyes as if she could unsee the image. Lila was everything Sarah wasn't. Vibrant, carefree, unburdened by years of failed fertility treatments. At 32, Sarah felt worn down, her body a battleground of hormone injections and dashed hopes. She glanced at the mirror across the room, catching her reflection. Dark circles under her eyes, her blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, her sweatshirt stained with coffee. When had she stopped feeling beautiful? When had Mark stopped noticing her? She thought back to their early days, when they'd been inseparable. They'd met at a friend's barbecue, Mark charming her with his quick wit and a shared love of old vinyl records. He'd called her Sunflower because of her bright smile, and they'd spent their first summer driving across the Midwest, singing along to Fleetwood Mac, dreaming of a future filled with kids and a big messy house. 7 years of marriage had weathered them. Her miscarriage 2 years ago, the endless doctor visits, the strain of trying to conceive, but she'd thought they were in it together. Now, staring at Lila's photo, she wondered if Mark had been slipping away even then. She forced herself to keep reading, each email a deeper cut. Mark and Lila had been meeting for over a year. Their messages a mix of flirty banter and intimate confessions. "You make me feel like I can breathe again," Mark wrote in one. "Things with Sarah are so heavy sometimes." Sarah's chest ached. Heavy. Was that how he saw her? A burden, dragging him down while Lila was his escape. Another email mentioned a weekend in a Denver hotel, Mark describing the view from their room, the way Lila laughed at his bad jokes over breakfast. Sarah remembered that weekend. Mark had told her he was in Boston for a tech conference. She'd spent those days alone, scrolling through fertility forums, baking cookies to distract herself from another negative test. She'd even texted him a photo of the cookies, and he'd replied with a heart emoji, saying he wished he were home. The lie felt like a slap now, sharp and stinging. She clicked on another photo, this one of Lila alone, sitting in a coffee shop with a sketchpad, her hair catching the light. She was beautiful, undeniably so, and Sarah hated herself for noticing. She wanted to hate Lila, to paint her as a villain, but the emails painted a different picture. Lila's words were warm, genuine, full of affection for Mark. Did she know he was married? The thought gnawed at Sarah, a mix of anger and curiosity. She opened a blank email, typing Lila's address, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. What would she say? "Who are you to my husband? Did you know he's breaking my heart?" She deleted the draft, her hands shaking. Confronting Lila felt like crossing another line, one she wasn't ready for. Instead, she searched Lila's name online, her heart pounding as results loaded. A portfolio website popped up, showcasing Lila's graphic design work. Bold, colorful illustrations, nothing like Sarah's more subdued style. There was a bio. Lila Martin, 28, Denver-based artist. Lover of coffee, mountains, and good stories. No mention of a boyfriend, no hint of Mark. But there was a link to her Instagram, and Sarah's cursor hesitated. Did she dare look? What if there were more photos, more proof of their life together? She clicked, unable to stop herself. Lila's Instagram was public, a curated grid of art, sunsets, and candid moments. Sarah scrolled, her breath hitching at a post from 3 weeks ago. Lila and Mark at a Denver brewery, clinking glasses, his hand resting on her knee. The caption read, "Cheers to good company." Sarah's stomach lurched. That was the weekend of the plane ticket stub, the one Mark claimed was a Seattle conference. The comments were full of heart emojis and friends asking, "Who's the cute guy?" Lila hadn't replied. Sarah closed the laptop, her tears falling freely now. The lavender candle flickered, its scent cloying in the small room. She felt humiliated, small, like a shadow of the woman Mark had once loved. She thought of their last fertility appointment, Mark holding her hand as the doctor explained their next steps. He'd been so attentive, promising they'd get through it together. Had he been texting Lila that same day, planning his next trip while Sarah cried in the exam room? The front door creaked open and Sarah froze. "Babe, you still up?" Mark's voice was soft, sleepy, as he stepped into the hallway. She wiped her face, her heart racing. She couldn't let him see her like this, not yet. She needed more time, more evidence before she could face him. "In here," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. She shut down the laptop and stood, smoothing her sweatshirt. Mark appeared in the doorway, his gym clothes swapped for pajamas, his dark hair mussed. He smiled, and for a moment, he was her Mark, the man who'd proposed under a starry sky, who'd held her through her darkest days. "Working late again?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "You need to sleep, sunflower." The nickname stung, a reminder of everything she was losing. "Just finishing up," she said, forcing a smile. "I'll be in soon." He nodded, yawning, and headed back to bed. Sarah waited until his footsteps faded, then sank back into the chair, her hands covering her face. She wanted to believe it was a mistake, that Mark had an explanation, that Lila was a fling he'd ended. But the emails, the photos, the plane ticket, they told a different story, one she couldn't ignore. She pulled the ticket stub from her pocket, staring at it like it held the answers. Tomorrow she'd call his company again, dig into his travel records, maybe even contact Lila. She needed to know how far this went, how much of her marriage was a lie. But for now, she sat in the dark, the weight of Mark's betrayal pressing down on her, her heart breaking with every beat. The bedroom was too quiet, the kind of stillness that amplified every thought until it screamed. Sarah sat cross-legged on the bed, the comforter bunched around her, Mark's laptop balanced on her knees. It was 1:17 a.m., and the house felt like a stranger's. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the fridge downstairs, a reminder that her world was unraveling. Mark was asleep in the guest room, where he'd retreated after Sarah claimed she needed space to work late. She hadn't slept since finding the plane ticket stub 2 nights ago, and the emails between Mark and Lila Martin had haunted her every waking moment since. The bedroom was a shrine to their 7-year marriage, but tonight, it felt like a graveyard. On the nightstand sat a stack of pregnancy books, their spines worn from months of desperate hope. A small box of ovulation kits, half used, peeked out from the drawer she hadn't closed properly. Above the dresser, a framed photo of her and Mark at a fertility clinic, smiling through their exhaustion, mocked her. She'd thought they were in this together, battling the heartbreak of failed cycles, clinging to the dream of a child. Now, the laptop screen glowed with the truth. Mark had been living another life, one that didn't include her. She'd spent the last hour digging deeper into his emails, her fingers trembling as she navigated his secret account. The messages to Lila were intimate, vivid, a year-long affair laid bare in flirty banter and stolen weekends. But Sarah needed more. She needed to know how deep this betrayal ran, whether it was just an escape or something more permanent. She clicked on the trash folder, her heart pounding. Mark was meticulous about covering his tracks, but he wasn't perfect. Deleted emails lingered here, waiting to be restored, and Sarah's gut told her there was more to find. She scrolled through the deleted messages, most of them mundane, work reminders, spam, a confirmation for a Denver hotel. Then she saw it, an email from Lila, dated 10 days ago, with an attachment labeled Our Little Miracle JPG. Sarah's breath caught, her hand freezing on the trackpad. The subject line was simple. For you. Her mouth went dry, a sickening dread pooling in her stomach. She clicked to restore the email, her pulse hammering in her ears. The attachment loaded slowly, each pixel a knife twisting in her chest. An ultrasound image filled the screen, grainy and black and white, but unmistakable. A tiny shape, no bigger than a peanut, curled in the center, with measurements and a date stamped in the corner. September 27, 2025. Below the image, Lila had written, Our Little Miracle. Can't wait to meet them with you. Sarah stared, her vision blurring as tears welled up. Baby. Lila was pregnant. Mark was going to be a father. Not with her, but with this woman in Denver. The room spun, the air too thick to breathe. Sarah shoved the laptop onto the bed and pressed her hands to her face, a sob catching in her throat. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to wake Mark and demand answers, but all she could do was sit there, drowning in the weight of it. For 3 years, she and Mark had been trying for a baby. 3 years of doctor visits, hormone injections, and tears shed over negative tests. She could still feel the cold gel on her stomach during their last ultrasound, the technician's pitying smile when the screen showed nothing but emptiness. Mark had held her hand, whispering, We'll get there, sunflower. I promise. Had he known about Lila's pregnancy then? Had he been lying to her face while planning a future with someone else? She stood, pacing the room, her bare feet cold against the hardwood. The ovulation kits on the nightstand stared back at her, a cruel reminder of her failure. She remembered the first time they'd seen a fertility specialist, Mark's arm around her as the doctor explained their options. He'd been so supportive, bringing her tea when the injections made her nauseous, researching clinics late at night. They'd named their future child, Emma for a girl, Lucas for a boy, dreaming of first steps and bedtime stories. Now those dreams belonged to Lila, to the little miracle growing inside her. Sarah sank onto the floor, her back against the bed, and pulled the laptop closer. She reread Lila's email, the words searing into her memory. Our little miracle. The phrase was so tender, so full of joy, it made Sarah's heart ache. She scrolled through the email thread, piecing together the timeline. Mark had known about the pregnancy for weeks, since at least early September, based on his replies. "I'm still processing," he'd written to Lila. "But I'm here for you always." Another email, sent while Sarah was at a fertility appointment, read, "Can't wait to see you next week. We'll figure this out together." Sarah's hands clenched into fists. He'd been in Denver, not Seattle, planning a life with Lila while she sat in a sterile exam room, hoping for their own miracle. She thought back to that appointment 2 weeks ago. Mark had claimed he was swamped with work, but he'd texted her afterward. "How'd it go, babe? Thinking of you." She'd believed him, clinging to his words like a lifeline. Now she saw them for what they were. A performance, a lie to keep her in the dark. She opened the ultrasound again, staring at the tiny shape. It was real, undeniable. Lila was carrying Mark's child, something Sarah had been chasing for years, her body failing her at every turn. The betrayal wasn't just the affair. It was the theft of their shared dream, the future they'd built together. Tears streamed down her face, hot and relentless. She wanted to hate Lila, to blame her for stealing Mark, but the email suggested Lila might not even know about Sarah. Mark's messages were careful, never mentioning his wife, always framing his life as free and unencumbered. "Work's been crazy," he'd written to Lila, "but you're my escape." The word echoed in Sarah's mind, cutting deeper than the rest. Was that all she was to him now? A cage he needed to flee. She stood, wiping her face, and crossed to the dresser. The fertility books mocked her, their titles promising hope. Getting pregnant naturally, the IVF journey. She grabbed one and hurled it across the room, the pages fluttering as it hit the wall. The sound was louder than she expected, and she froze, listening for Mark's footsteps. Nothing. Just his snores, steady and oblivious, from the guest room. How could he sleep so easily, knowing what he'd done? Sarah returned to the laptop, her hands shaking as she saved the ultrasound to a hidden folder on her own drive. She needed proof, something tangible for when she confronted him. Because she would confront him, she had to. But not tonight. Tonight she was too raw, too broken. She closed the laptop and crawled into bed, pulling the comforter over her head like a child hiding from a nightmare. But the nightmare was real, and it was hers. She lay there, staring at the ceiling, the ultrasound burned into her mind. She saw it every time she closed her eyes. The grainy image, the date, Lila's words. She thought of her own ultrasounds, the empty screens that had crushed her hope month after month. She remembered the miscarriage 2 years ago, the way Mark had held her as she sobbed, promising they'd try again. Had he been with Lila then, too? How long had he been splitting his heart between them? The clock ticked past 2 a.m., then 3 o'clock. Sarah didn't sleep. She couldn't. Her mind raced, replaying every moment of the past year, searching for signs she'd missed. The late nights, the guarded phone, the way Mark had stopped talking about their future baby with the same enthusiasm. She'd thought it was stress, or maybe his own grief over their struggles. Now she saw it for what it was. Detachment, a slow withdrawal from their marriage. She thought of her best friend, Emily, who'd been pushing her to open up about Mark's distance. "You guys okay?" Emily had asked over coffee last month, her brow furrowed. Sarah had brushed it off, insisting they were just navigating a rough patch. Now she wished she'd confided in her, wished she'd had someone to share this weight. But she couldn't tell Emily, not yet. The shame was too heavy, the fear of judgment too real. What would she say? "My husband's having a baby with another woman." The words felt like poison, too painful to speak. She rolled onto her side, clutching Mark's pillow. It smelled of his cedarwood cologne, a scent that used to comfort her but now made her stomach churn. She wanted to confront him, to scream and demand answers, but fear held her back. What if he chose Lila? What if he left her for this new life, this new family? The thought was unbearable, a fresh wave of grief crashing over her. By 4 a.m., Sarah was still awake, her eyes stinging with exhaustion. She got up and opened the bedroom window, letting the cold October air flood the room. It stung her skin, grounding her in the moment. She stared out at the quiet street, the neighbor's porch light casting a soft glow. She felt alone, utterly alone, in a way she hadn't since her miscarriage. But this was worse. That loss had been shared, a pain they'd carried together. This betrayal was hers alone, a wound Mark had inflicted without a second thought. She returned to the bed, her resolve hardening. She wouldn't confront him yet. She needed more evidence, a plan, a way to protect herself. But she would find out everything. How long he'd known about the pregnancy, whether Lila knew about her, what Mark planned to do. She'd call his company again, check his bank statements, maybe even reach out to Lila. The thought terrified her, but so did the idea of living in the dark. As dawn crept through the window, painting the room in pale gray light, Sarah made a silent vow. She'd survive this somehow. She'd piece together the truth, no matter how much it hurt. And when she faced Mark, she'd do it with her head high, even if her heart was in pieces. The kitchen smelled of coffee and betrayal. Sarah stood at the counter, her hands gripping the edge of the granite, the cool surface grounding her as her heart raced. It was Saturday morning, the sun streaming through the window, painting the room in a cruelly cheerful light. The kitchen had always been their sanctuary, where they'd danced to old records, planned their future over pancakes, laughed through late-night talks about baby names. Now it felt like a battlefield, the air thick with the weight of what she was about to do. The plane ticket stub, the emails, the ultrasound, they sat on the counter in front of her, a carefully arranged indictment. She'd spent the last 2 days gathering her courage, her resolve hardening with every sleepless hour. The ultrasound image, with Lila's note about our little miracle, had burned itself into her mind, a wound that reopened every time she closed her eyes. She'd called Mark's company yesterday, confirming what she already suspected. No Seattle conference, no Boston trip, no business travel at all in months. Every work trip had been a lie, a cover for his secret life with Lila Martin, the 28-year-old graphic designer now carrying his child. Mark was in the living room, scrolling through his phone, oblivious to the storm about to break. Sarah had waited until this morning, when the house was quiet, no distractions, no escape. She'd rehearsed her words 100 times, but her throat was tight, her palms sweaty. What if he lied again? What if he left her for Lila? The thought twisted her stomach, but she couldn't back down now. She needed answers, even if they shattered her. "Mark," she called, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Can you come in here?" He appeared in the doorway, wearing a faded t-shirt and jeans, his dark hair still damp from the shower. His smile was easy, the same one that had charmed her a decade ago. "What's up, Sunflower?" he said, grabbing a mug from the cabinet. The nickname stung, a reminder of everything she was losing. "Sit down," she said, her tone sharp enough to make him pause. His brow furrowed, but he slid into a chair at the kitchen table, his mug clinking against the wood. Sarah stayed standing, the counter between them like a barricade. She pushed the plane ticket stub toward him, her fingers trembling. "Explain this." Mark glanced at the stub, his expression flickering, surprise, then something guarded. "What's this?" he asked, picking it up, his voice too casual. "A plane ticket." "To Denver," Sarah said, her voice rising. 3 weeks ago. You told me you were in Seattle for a conference." "There was no conference, Mark. I called your office." His eyes widened just for a second before he leaned back, folding his arms. "Okay, hold on. You're checking up on me now." His tone was defensive, a hint of accusation that made her blood boil. "Don't," she snapped, slamming the stack of printed emails onto the table. "I found these on your laptop. Lila Martin. A year of emails, Mark. Secret trips, secret dates. And this." She slid the ultrasound image across the table, her hand shaking so hard it nearly tore. "She's pregnant. Your baby." Mark's face drained of color, his jaw tightening as he stared at the ultrasound. For a moment he was silent, his eyes fixed on the grainy image of the tiny shape, Lila's note scrawled beneath it. Our little miracle. Sarah's heart pounded, her breath shallow, waiting for him to speak, to explain, to beg for forgiveness. But when he looked up, his expression was guarded, not remorseful. Sarah, He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. This isn't what you think. Then what is it? She shouted, her voice breaking. She hadn't meant to yell, but the anger surged out, unstoppable. You've been lying to me for a year. Sneaking off to Denver to her while I'm here, thinking we're trying for a baby together. How could you? Mark stood, pacing to the sink, his hands gripping the counter as if to steady himself. Okay, yes, I've been seeing Lila. But it's not. He hesitated, searching for words. It's not serious. It was a mistake, Sarah. A stupid, stupid mistake. A mistake. Sarah's voice trembled, tears burning her eyes. A year isn't a mistake, Mark. A baby isn't a mistake. She pointed at the ultrasound, her hand shaking. You knew about this for weeks, didn't you? While we were going to fertility appointments, while I was injecting myself with hormones, you were planning a life with her. No. Mark turned, his eyes wide, pleading. It's not like that. The pregnancy was an accident. I didn't plan this, Sarah. I swear I love you. I want us to work. His words hit her like a punch, not because they were sincere, but because they weren't. She could hear the hollowness in his voice, the rehearsed cadence of someone caught. She thought of their last fertility appointment, Mark's hand in hers as the doctor adjusted her hormone dosage. He'd kissed her forehead, promising they'd get through it. Had he texted Lila afterward, planning his next trip? The memory twisted in her gut, a fresh betrayal. An accident, she said, her voice low, dangerous. You've been sleeping with her for a year, Mark. You wrote her love letters. You took her hiking, to hotels, to breweries. You called her your escape. She spat the word, remembering the email that had gutted her. Was I that bad? Was our life so terrible that you needed to run to her? Mark flinched, his face crumpling. No, Sarah, it's not about you. It's... He paused, rubbing his face. Things got heavy, okay? With the fertility stuff, the pressure, I just got lost. Lila was there and it was easy. But it doesn't mean anything. You're my wife. The words were meant to soothe, but they only fueled her rage. She stepped closer, her fists clenched at her sides. Don't you dare blame me, she said, her voice shaking with fury. I've been killing myself to give us a family. And you're out there playing house with her? She's having your baby, Mark. How is that not serious? He looked away, his jaw tight, and Sarah's heart sank. She'd wanted him to fight for her, to fall to his knees, to beg for forgiveness. Instead, he was deflecting, his answers vague, his eyes avoiding hers. She thought of their wedding day, Mark's vows whispered under a canopy of fairy lights. You're my home, sunflower. Always. She'd believed him, believed in their love, even through the miscarriage, the endless tests, the nights she'd cried herself to sleep. Now his promises felt like lies, each one a brick in the wall he'd built between them. Tell me about the pregnancy, she said, her voice steady now, though her hands trembled. When did you know? What are you planning with her? Mark sighed, leaning against the counter, his shoulders slumped. She told me a few weeks ago. I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. I told her I'd support her, but I didn't mean. He stopped, his eyes darting to the ultrasound, then back to Sarah. I don't want to be with her, Sarah. I want you. We can fix this. His words were a lifeline, and for a fleeting moment, Sarah wanted to grab it. She wanted to believe they could go back, that he could undo the past year, erase Lila and her baby. But the ultrasound sat between them, undeniable. She thought of the nights she'd spent charting her cycle, the injections that left bruises on her thighs, the hope she'd clung to despite every setback. Mark had been there, holding her hand, promising they'd be parents together. Now he was a father-to-be with someone else. How do you fix this? She asked, her voice breaking. You lied to me for a year. You let me think we were in this together, while you were building a life with her. Do you even love me anymore? Of course I love you, he said, stepping toward her, his hands outstretched. She backed away, her hip hitting the counter, the pain sharp but grounding. Sarah, please. I messed up, okay? I'm human. But I don't want to lose you. She laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even her. You're human. That's your excuse. You didn't just mess up, Mark. You betrayed me. You betrayed us. She gestured at the kitchen, at the life they'd built, the recipe cards pinned to the fridge, the photo of them at Navy Pier above the table. This was supposed to be ours. Our family, our future. And you gave it to her. Mark's face hardened, a flash of anger breaking through his remorse. You're acting like I planned this, Sarah. I didn't. Lila was a distraction. I didn't mean for it to go this far. A distraction. Sarah's voice rose, her anger boiling over. She grabbed the ultrasound and held it up, her hand shaking. This isn't a distraction, Mark. This is a child. Our child. While I've been breaking my body to give us one, you're out there making one with her. He flinched, his eyes dropping to the floor. I know, he said quietly. I know it's bad. But I'm here, aren't I? I'm choosing you. His words were a knife, twisting deeper. Choosing her. As if she were a consolation prize. A fallback now that his secret was out. She thought of Lila's emails, full of love and excitement. Her Instagram posts with Mark's hand on her knee. Did Lila know about her? Did she know she was the other woman? Sarah's mind raced, her anger mingling with a desperate need for clarity. What does Lila think? She asked, her voice low. Does she know you're married? Does she know about me? Mark hesitated. His silence louder than any confession. She knows I'm married, he said finally. His voice barely above a whisper. But I told her we were having problems. That we were drifting. Sarah's breath caught, her vision blurring with tears. Drifting, she repeated, her voice trembling. You told her we were done. While I was planning our future, you were telling her I was the problem. No, Mark said, stepping closer, his hands raised. I didn't say that. I didn't tell her everything. I didn't want to hurt her. Hurt her. Sarah's voice broke, a sob escaping. What about me, Mark? What about hurting me? She turned away, her hands covering her face, trying to hold herself together. The kitchen felt too small, the walls closing in. She wanted to run, to scream, to erase the past week and go back to the life she thought she had. Mark reached for her, his hand brushing her shoulder, but she jerked away. Don't touch me, she said, her voice raw. You don't get to touch me after this. Sarah, please, he said, his voice cracking. I'm sorry. I'll end it with her. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't give up on us. She turned to face him, her eyes burning with tears. How can I trust you? She asked. You've been lying to me for a year. You've been lying to her too. Who are you, Mark? Because you're not the man I married. He stared at her, his mouth opening then closing. For the first time he had no answer, no deflection. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Sarah's hands shook, her body humming with adrenaline. She wanted him to fight for her, to prove he still loved her. But his evasiveness, his vague promises, left her feeling smaller, more confused. Was this her fault? Had she pushed him away with her focus on fertility, her tears, her heaviness? She thought of their first year of marriage, cooking dinner together in this very kitchen, Mark spinning her around to a Beatles song. They'd been so happy, so sure of each other. Even after the miscarriage, he'd held her through the worst of it, promising they'd try again. Now those memories felt tainted, like a movie she'd misremembered. Had he been cheating then too? Or had he waited until she was at her lowest, consumed by their fertility struggles, to seek out Lila? I need you to tell me everything, she said finally, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. No more lies. How long have you been with her? What are you going to do about the baby? Mark sighed, sinking back into the chair, his head in his hands. I met her last year at a conference in Denver. Started as nothing, just talking. But it grew and I didn't stop it. The baby, I don't know, Sarah. I haven't figured it out yet. His vagueness was a fresh wound, a refusal to take responsibility. Sarah's anger flared again, but beneath it was a hollow ache, a fear that she was losing him for good. You haven't figured it out, she said, her voice rising. She's having your child, Mark. You've had weeks to think about it, and that's all you've got. I'm trying, he shouted, standing again, his face flushed. This isn't easy for me either. I didn't want this to happen. Sarah laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You didn't want this. You chose this, Mark. Every trip, every email, every lie. You chose her over me. He stared at her, his eyes wet, but he didn't deny it. The silence was deafening, a confirmation of her worst fears. Sarah turned away, her hands gripping the counter again, her knuckles white. The kitchen clock ticked, each second a reminder of the life slipping away from her. She wanted to believe they could fix this, that Mark's love for her was real, but his words, his deflections, felt like gaslighting, twisting her reality until she questioned herself. I need time, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't do this right now. Mark nodded, his shoulders slumping. Okay. I'll sleep in the guest room. We can talk tomorrow. She didn't respond, didn't look at him as he left the kitchen. His footsteps heavy on the stairs. When the guest room door clicked shut, Sarah sank to the floor, her back against the cabinets, her tears falling freely. The evidence still lay on the table. The ticket stub, the emails, the ultrasound, like a crime scene she couldn't escape. She wanted to hate Mark, to walk away and never look back, but a part of her still loved him, still hoped he'd fight for her. That hope was a betrayal in itself, a cruel trick her heart played as it broke. The parking lot outside the coffee shop was quiet, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the asphalt. Sarah sat in her car, the engine off, the air growing stale. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, as she stared at the phone in the passenger seat. Lila Martin's contact information glowed on the screen, pulled from one of Mark's emails. A Denver phone number, a name that had haunted Sarah for days. The ultrasound image, with its grainy outline of a child, Mark's child, still burned in her mind, a wound that refused to close. It was Sunday, 2 days after the confrontation in the kitchen. Mark had been sleeping in the guest room. His apologies and promises to fix things, hanging between them like smoke. Sarah hadn't spoken to him since, her anger and grief too raw to navigate. She'd spent the weekend replaying his words, his vague deflections about Lila's pregnancy, his claim that it was an accident. But she needed more than his half-truths. She needed to know who Lila was, what she believed, and whether she knew she was tearing Sarah's life apart. The coffee shop's neon sign flickered in the distance, its warmth mocking her isolation. She'd driven here to escape the house, its walls heavy with memories of Mark's betrayal. The kitchen, where they'd once danced to old records, now felt like a crime scene, littered with the plane ticket stub, the printed emails, the ultrasound. She couldn't face him, not yet, but she couldn't stay in the dark either. Calling Lila was a risk, a leap into the unknown, but Sarah needed answers, even if they broke her further. She picked up the phone, her fingers trembling as she opened the contact. What would she say? She couldn't just blurt out, "I'm Mark's wife." The thought of revealing herself, of exposing her pain to a stranger, made her stomach churn. Instead, she decided to pose as a friend of Mark's, someone checking in, fishing for information. It felt dishonest, but so had Mark's entire year of lies. She typed a quick text to test the waters. "Hey Lila, this is a friend of Mark Thompson's. Can we talk?" Her thumb hovered over the send button, her heart pounding. What if Lila didn't respond? What if she did? Before she could overthink it, she hit send. The message whooshed into the void, and Sarah's breath caught. She leaned back, the car seat creaking, and stared out the windshield. The parking lot was nearly empty, Just a few cars and a barista taking a smoke break by the dumpster. Sarah's mind drifted to the last time she and Mark had come to this coffee shop, 6 months ago, sharing a latte and laughing about baby names. Emma for a girl, Lucas for a boy. She'd felt so close to him then, so sure they were on the same path. Now, she wondered if he'd been texting Lila that day, planning his next trip to Denver. Her phone buzzed, jolting her upright. A reply from Lila. "Sure, I can talk. What's this about?" Sarah's pulse raced, her mouth dry. She hadn't expected a response so fast. She stared at the words, her mind scrambling for a plan. A call would be better. She needed to hear Lila's voice to gauge her sincerity. She tapped the call button before she could lose her nerve, the phone ringing once, twice, 3 times. Her heart thudded against her ribs, each ring amplifying her dread. "Hello." The voice was light, warm, with a hint of a Western drawl. Sarah's throat tightened. This was Lila, the woman who'd stolen her husband, her dream, her future. "Hi, Lila," Sarah said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "This is Emily, a friend of Mark's. I hope I'm not bothering you." "No bother at all," Lila said, her tone bright, unsuspecting. "How do you know Mark? Is everything okay?" There was a note of concern, and Sarah's stomach twisted. Lila sounded kind, genuine, nothing like the villain she'd imagined. "He's fine," Sarah lied, her fingers tightening around the phone. I heard you two are close and I wanted to check in. He's been going through some stuff, you know." "Oh yeah," Lila said, her voice softening. "He's told me things have been tough. With his marriage ending and all. It's been a lot for him." Sarah's breath caught, her vision blurring. His marriage ending. The words hit like a slap, sharp and disorienting. She gripped the steering wheel, her nails digging into the leather. "His marriage ending," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," Lila said, oblivious to Sarah's turmoil. "He said he and his wife are separated, working on a divorce. It's been rough, but he's trying to move forward. I've been there for him, you know." Sarah's heart shattered, the pieces scattering like glass. Mark had told Lila they were separated. He'd painted a future with her, one where Sarah didn't exist. She thought of their confrontation, Mark's insistence that he loved her, that he wanted to fix things. Had that been a lie too? Was he planning to leave her for Lila, for their baby? "That's interesting," Sarah managed, her voice trembling. She wanted to scream to tell Lila the truth, but she needed more. "So you and Mark are serious?" Lila laughed, a soft, happy sound that cut through Sarah like a knife. "I guess you could say that. We've been seeing each other for a year and now with the baby coming it's a lot but exciting, you know? He's been so sweet about it, talking about moving here to Denver." Sarah's chest tightened, her breath shallow. She closed her eyes, picturing the ultrasound, Lila's note. "Our little miracle." She saw Mark's arm around Lila in the Instagram photo, their smiles bright against the Denver mountains. He was building a life with her, planning a future, while Sarah was left chasing a dream he'd already given to someone else. "That's great," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "The baby, I mean. Congratulations." "Thanks," Lila said, her excitement palpable. "I'm only 12 weeks, but it's starting to feel real. Mark's been amazing, sending me books on parenting talking about names. He's really stepping up." Sarah's tears fell silently, dripping onto her lap. She thought of the parenting books on their nightstand, the ones she and Mark had pored over together, circling tips and dog-earing pages. She remembered their last fertility appointment, Mark's hand in hers as the doctor adjusted her hormone dosage. He'd been texting Lila about baby names while she was injecting herself with hope. The betrayal was a physical ache, a weight pressing on heart. "Emily, you okay?" Lila's voice broke through her thoughts, sharp with concern. Sarah wiped her face, her hand shaking. "Yeah, sorry. Just processing." "So, Mark's excited about the baby?" "Oh yeah," Lila said, her voice warm. "He was shocked at first, but he's come around. He's been calling it our little miracle. Says it's a fresh start for him. The words were a gut punch, echoing the ultrasound note. Sarah's vision blurred with fresh tears. Fresh start. Was that what Mark wanted? To erase her, their marriage, their struggles, and start over with Lila. She thought of his apologies in the kitchen. His promise to end things with Lila. Had he been lying to both of them, playing two lives against each other? Wow, Sarah said, forcing a neutral tone. That's big. So, he's planning to be there for you and the baby. I hope so, Lila said, a hint of uncertainty creeping into her voice. He's been a little vague about the future with the divorce and everything. But he's committed, you know. He's been coming to Denver every few weeks, helping me set up the nursery. Sarah's heart stopped. A nursery. She pictured Mark assembling a crib, painting walls, all the things they'd planned to do together. She thought of their spare room, still empty, meant for the baby they'd never had. That sounds serious, she said, her voice barely audible. It is, Lila said, her tone softening. I mean, I know it's complicated with his ex, but I think he's ready to move on. He deserves to be happy, you know. Sarah's breath hitched, a sob catching in her throat. His ex. That's what she was to Mark. A footnote in his new life. She wanted to scream the truth, to tell Lila she was his wife, not his ex, but the words wouldn't come. She felt betrayed by both of them. Mark's lies, Lila's unwitting role in her pain, but a part of her pitied Lila too. She sounded naive, manipulated, just like Sarah. Mark had deceived them both, spinning a web of lies to keep them apart. Are you sure you're okay? Lila asked. You sound off. I'm fine, Sarah lied, wiping her tears. Just surprised. I didn't know things were so serious with you two. Well, it's been a whirlwind, Lila said, laughing softly. But I love him. And the baby makes it feel meant to be, you know. Sarah's chest ached, her tears falling faster. She couldn't do this anymore. I have to go, she said abruptly. Thanks for talking. Oh, okay, Lila said, confused. Tell Mark I said hi, okay? Sarah ended the call without responding, dropping the phone onto the seat. She leaned forward, her forehead against the steering wheel, and let the sobs come. The car felt like a cage, trapping her pain inside. Lila's voice echoed in her mind. Bright, hopeful, oblivious. She didn't know about Sarah. Didn't know she was the other woman. Mark had lied to her too, promising a future he couldn't deliver. Sarah hated her happiness, her baby, her life with Mark, but she also pitied her, a woman caught in the same web of deception. She thought of their first year of marriage, Mark surprising her with a weekend trip to the lake, their dreams of a family taking shape. They'd lain under the stars, naming their future children. Now Lila was living that dream, while Sarah was left with nothing but lies. She pictured Lila's Instagram, the photos of her and Mark, their hands intertwined. Lila's life in Denver seemed vibrant, full of art and adventure, while Sarah's was a cycle of fertility clinics and heartbreak. The contrast was cruel, a mirror to her insecurities. Sarah's hand hovered over the phone. She could call Lila back, tell her the truth, expose Mark's lies. But what would it accomplish? Would Lila believe her, or would she cling to Mark's story? The thought of revealing herself, of admitting her humiliation, was unbearable. Yet the thought of staying silent, letting Mark continue his double life, was worse. She grabbed the phone, her fingers trembling, and opened a new text to Lila. I'm not Emily, she typed. I'm Mark's wife. He's not separated. Call me if you want the truth. Her thumb hovered over the send button, her heart pounding. She wanted to hurt Mark, to shatter his carefully constructed lies, but she also wanted to protect herself, to keep her pain private. She deleted the message, her tears falling onto the screen. The coffee shop's neon sign flickered off, the sky darkening outside. Sarah started the car, the engines hum a small comfort. She didn't know what to do next. Confront Mark again, contact Lila, or walk away. But one thing was clear. Mark had betrayed them both, and Sarah couldn't let him win. She'd find a way forward, even if it meant facing the truth alone. The living room was a war zone, the air thick with tension. Sarah stood by the couch, her arms crossed, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The late afternoon light filtered through the blinds, casting sharp stripes across the hardwood floor, a space once filled with laughter and movie nights now charged with the weight of her decision. She'd done it. She'd sent the text to Lila an hour ago, her fingers trembling as she typed the truth. "I'm not Emily. I'm Mark's wife. He's not separated. Call me if you want to know more." The moment she hit send, a rush of empowerment had surged through her, a fleeting sense of taking back control. But now, waiting for the fallout, that courage was crumbling into dread. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table and she lunged for it, her breath catching. A message from Lila, short and furious. "I just called Mark. He's a liar. I'm done with him. Don't contact me again." Sarah's heart sank, a mix of relief and guilt twisting in her gut. Lila knew now, she knew Mark was married, that he'd deceived her too. But the victory felt hollow. Sarah had shattered Lila's world, just as Mark had shattered hers, and the collateral damage was heavier than she'd expected. She sank onto the couch, her hands shaking as she reread Lila's text. She pictured Lila in her Denver apartment, maybe staring at the ultrasound of her little miracle, her trust in Mark crumbling. Sarah wanted to hate her, to blame her for stealing her husband, but Lila's words echoed her own pain. They were both victims of Mark's lies, caught in his web of manipulation. The thought made her chest ache, a fresh wave of grief for the life she thought she'd had. The front door slammed, jolting her upright. Mark's footsteps thundered through the foyer, heavy and deliberate, each one a warning. He appeared in the doorway, his face flushed with anger, his dark eyes blazing. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted, his voice shaking the quiet room. Sarah stood, her pulse racing, her resolve wavering under his fury. "What did I do?" she shot back, her voice trembling but firm. "I told Lila the truth, Mark. That you're married. That you lied to her, just like you lied to me." He stepped closer, his hands clenched into fists, his jaw tight. "You had no right," he yelled, his voice raw. "You went through my emails, called her, and now you've ruined everything. Lila's freaking out, Sarah. She won't talk to me." "Good." Sarah snapped, her anger flaring. She stepped toward him, the coffee table between them like a flimsy shield. "She deserves to know who you really are. You told her we were separated, Mark. You let her think you were building a life with her, while I was here, trying to save our marriage." Mark ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room like a caged animal. "You don't get it," he said, his voice dropping, sharp and accusing. "You pushed me away, Sarah. All the fertility stuff, the constant pressure, the crying, it was too much. She was easy. She didn't make me feel like a failure every day." His words hit like a punch, stealing her breath. Sarah's vision blurred with tears, her hands trembling at her sides. "You're blaming me," she said, her voice breaking. "I was killing myself to give us a family, and you were running off to her? You're having a baby with her, Mark. How is that my fault?" He stopped pacing, his shoulders slumping, but his eyes were still hard. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said, his tone softer but unconvincing. "The pregnancy was an accident. I was going to end things with her, Sarah. I told you I want to fix this. Why couldn't you just trust me?" "Trust you?" Sarah laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You've been lying to me for a year. Sneaking off to Denver, telling her we're done, planning a nursery while I'm injecting hormones. How am I supposed to trust you?" Mark's face twisted, a mix of guilt and defiance. "You didn't have to go digging," he said, his voice low, menacing. "You invaded my privacy, Sarah. You called her, stirred up all this drama. This is on you now." Her stomach twisted, his words planting a seed of doubt. Had she escalated this? Should she have waited, given him a chance to explain? She thought of their confrontation in the kitchen, his promises to end things with Lila, his claim that he loved her. For a fleeting moment, she'd wanted to believe him, to cling to the hope that they could salvage their marriage. Now, his anger, his accusations, made her question herself. Was she the one tearing them apart? She shook her head, pushing the doubt away. "Don't you dare," she said, her voice steady now, though tears streamed down her face. "You did this, Mark. You lied to both of us. You made her think you were free, and you made me think you were mine. This is on you." He stared at her, his eyes wet, his jaw tight. For a moment, she thought he might apologize, might finally take responsibility. But then he turned away, grabbing his phone from the coffee table. "I need space," he muttered. "I can't deal with this right now." "No," Sarah said, stepping in front of him, her heart pounding. "You don't get to walk away. You need to leave, Mark. Pack your things and go. I can't live like this." He froze, his eyes narrowing. "You're kicking me out. After everything we've been through. Sarah, we can work through this. Love you. I don't want to lose you." His words were a lifeline, and for a second she wavered. She remembered their first date, Mark spinning her around a dance floor at a friend's wedding. His laughter warm against her ear. They'd been so in love, so sure of their future. Even after the miscarriage, he'd held her through the grief, promising they'd try again. But now those memories were tainted, overshadowed by Lila's ultrasound, her excited voice on the phone, the nursery Mark was helping her build. "You've already lost me," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "You chose her. You chose a life with her and your baby. Get out." Mark's face crumpled, but he didn't move. "I'm not leaving," he said, his tone defiant. "This is my house too. We can figure this out, Sarah. Don't throw away 7 years over this." She stared at him, her anger giving way to a hollow ache. He was manipulating her, turning her resolve against her, making her feel like the one destroying their marriage. She wanted to scream, to throw him out, but her strength was slipping. What if she was overreacting? What if they could fix this? The doubt gnawed at her, a cruel echo of his accusations. She turned away, her hands covering her face, and sank onto the couch. "I can't do this right now," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Just leave me alone." Mark hesitated, then grabbed his keys and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. The silence that followed was deafening, the living room suffocating in its emptiness. Sarah's tears fell freely, her body shaking with sobs. She'd felt powerful sending that text to Lila, but now she felt small, broken, questioning everything. Her phone buzzed again, and she glanced at it, expecting another message from Lila. Instead, it was Emily, her best friend. "You okay? You've been quiet. Coffee tomorrow." Sarah's thumb hovered over the reply button, her heart aching for someone to confide in. Emily had always been her rock, the one who'd listened through the fertility struggles, the one who'd pushed her to talk about Mark's distance. But the thought of telling her the truth, Mark's affair, Lila's pregnancy, the lies, was overwhelming. What would Emily think? That Sarah was a fool for not seeing it sooner. That she'd failed as a wife. She typed a quick reply. "Not feeling great. Maybe tomorrow." She hit send, then dropped the phone, her hands trembling. She wanted to call Emily to spill everything, but the shame was too heavy. Instead, she curled up on the couch, pulling a throw blanket over her shoulders. The living room smelled faintly of Mark's cologne, a cruel reminder of the man she thought she knew. She thought of calling Emily anyway, of driving to her house and letting the truth pour out. Emily would listen, would hug her, would tell her to leave Mark. "You deserve better," she'd say, her voice fierce, like she had after the miscarriage when Sarah doubted herself. But the idea of being alone, of starting over without Mark, terrified her. 7 years of marriage, of shared dreams and struggles. Could she really walk away? What if Mark was right and they could work through this? What if Lila's pregnancy changed nothing? The doubt was suffocating, Mark's accusations echoing in her mind. She'd invaded his privacy, escalated the situation, ruined his chance to handle things with Lila. But then she thought of the ultrasound, Lila's voice on the phone, the nursery in Denver. Mark had made his choices long before she'd sent that text. She wasn't the one who'd ruined everything, he was. She stood, wiping her tears, her resolve flickering back to life. She couldn't let Mark's manipulation win. She'd call Emily tomorrow, tell her everything and figure out her next steps. For now, she needed to protect herself, to hold on to the truth she'd uncovered. Mark could refuse to leave, but she wouldn't let him rewrite her reality. Not anymore. The bank smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, a sterile contrast to the chaos in Sarah's heart. She sat in a stiff chair across from a teller, her hands folded tightly in her lap, a folder of printed bank statements clutched like a lifeline. It was Monday morning, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the counter between them. Sarah's eyes stung from lack of sleep, her body humming with a mix of rage and dread. Since the confrontation with Mark 2 days ago, when he'd stormed out after blaming her for ruining everything with Lila, she'd been unable to sit still. His accusations echoed in her mind, but so did Lila's furious text. "He's a liar. I'm done with him." Sarah needed more than words now. She needed proof, something tangible to anchor her in the truth. The teller, a young woman with a tight ponytail and a name tag reading Jessica, clicked through the computer, her expression neutral. "So, you're looking for details on these withdrawals?" Jessica asked, glancing at the highlighted transactions Sarah had circled in red. "Yes," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "They're from our joint savings account. I need to know where the money went." She slid the folder across the counter, her heart pounding. The statements covered the past year, and the numbers didn't lie. Thousands of dollars had vanished, large withdrawals that coincided with Mark's business trips to Denver. She'd found the statements yesterday, buried in a drawer in their home office, and each one had been a fresh wound, a new layer of Mark's betrayal. Jessica nodded, her fingers tapping the keyboard. "Let me pull up the account history. Can you confirm the account number?" Sarah recited it, her mind flashing back to the day she and Mark had opened the account 5 years ago. They'd been so excited, sitting in the same bank, dreaming of the future. A house, a family, maybe a trip to Europe. The savings account was their safety net, their baby fund, as Mark had called it, meant for fertility treatments and, one day, a nursery. She'd trusted him to manage it, never questioning the occasional withdrawals he said were for work expenses. Now, she saw those withdrawals for what they were. Funding for his secret life with Lila. "Okay," Jessica said, turning the monitor so Sarah could see. "Here's the activity. There are several large transfers to a PayPal account under the name Lila Martin, and some to a property management company in Denver. Looks like rent payments, maybe. And a few to a medical billing service." Sarah's stomach lurched. Rent payments. Medical bills. Lila's ultrasound flashed in her mind, the grainy image of Mark's child, captioned, "Our Little Miracle." He'd been paying for Lila's life, her apartment, her doctor's visits, while Sarah was pinching pennies for their own fertility treatments. She leaned forward, her voice tight. "Can you print those details? Every transfer, every date." Jessica nodded, her eyes softening with a hint of sympathy. "Sure thing. It'll take a few minutes." As the printer hummed, Sarah stared at the statements, her red pen circling dates that matched Mark's trips to Denver. Each withdrawal was a betrayal, a $sign attached to his lies. She thought of their last fertility appointment, Mark's hand in hers as she winced through another injection. He'd promised they'd keep trying, that they'd use the savings if they needed to. Had he been funneling that money to Lila even then? The thought made her want to scream, to tear the statements to shreds, but she forced herself to stay calm. She needed evidence not just for herself, but for the divorce she was starting to imagine. A future without Mark, as terrifying as it was inevitable. Back at home, Sarah retreated to the home office, a small room cluttered with books and her old graphic design projects. The space smelled faintly of ink and dust, a reminder of the creative life she'd put on hold for their fertility journey. She spread the bank statements across the desk, alongside the plane ticket stub, the printed emails, and a screenshot of Lila's ultrasound. It was a crime scene of her marriage, each piece of evidence a nail in its coffin. She opened Mark's laptop, her fingers trembling as she logged into their joint accounts, determined to dig deeper. The PayPal transfers were the first to catch her eye. $1,200 here, $800 there, sent to Lila Martin over the past 6 months. One transfer dated 3 months ago had a memo. For the art show. Sarah's chest tightened. She remembered Lila's Instagram, a post about her gallery opening in Denver, Mark's arm around her in the background. He'd paid for it, using their savings, while Sarah was budgeting for their next round of IVF. She clicked through their credit card statements, her heart sinking as she found more. Receipts for a Denver hotel, a restaurant called Mountain Brew, a jewelry store purchase for a custom necklace. She pictured Lila wearing it, oblivious to the fact that it was bought with Sarah's dreams. She stood, her legs shaky, and looked around the office. The room felt different now, no longer a shared space but hers alone. She was terrified. Of divorce, of being alone, of starting over, but the rage in her heart was stronger. Mark had taken so much, but he wouldn't take her strength. Not anymore. The living room felt like a hollowed-out shell, its warmth drained by the weight of betrayal. Sarah stood by the window, the late morning light filtering through the blinds, casting jagged shadows across the hardwood floor. The house was quieter now, the air heavy with the aftermath of her discoveries. Mark's affair, Lila's pregnancy, the siphoned savings. The evidence sat in a locked drawer in her office, a USB drive filled with bank statements, emails, and the ultrasound that had shattered her world. It was Tuesday, and Mark had been tiptoeing around her since their last argument. His apologies thin and unconvincing. She couldn't take it anymore. The lies, the manipulation, the way he looked at her like she was the one breaking them apart. Mark was in the kitchen, the clink of a coffee mug against the counter, a grating reminder of his presence. She'd spent the morning steeling herself, her rage and resolve building like a storm. Emily's words from yesterday echoed in her mind. You need to protect yourself, Sarah. He's already taken so much. Her friend was right. Mark had taken her trust, her dreams, their future, and she wasn't going to let him take her dignity too. Today she'd end this charade, even if it meant tearing her heart in two. Mark, she called, her voice steady but sharp, cutting through the quiet. We need to talk. Now. He appeared in the doorway, his dark hair mussed, his eyes wary. He wore a faded hoodie, the one she'd bought him for their first anniversary, and the sight of it twisted her gut. What's up? He said, his tone cautious, like he was stepping into a minefield. Sarah crossed her arms, her heart pounding. You need to leave, she said, her voice low but firm. Pack your things and go. I can't do this anymore. Mark's face fell, his eyes widening. Sarah, come on, he said, stepping closer. His hands raised in a pleading gesture. We can work through this. I told you I'm done with Lila. I want us to fix this. His words were a familiar refrain, the same promises he'd made in the kitchen, hollow and rehearsed. Sarah's anger flared, her hands clenching into fists. Fix this, she snapped, stepping toward him, the coffee table between them like a barricade. You lied to me for a year, Mark. You slept with her, got her pregnant, spent our savings on her life. You told her we were separated. There's nothing left to fix. He flinched, his jaw tightening, but he didn't back down. I made a mistake, Sarah, he said, his voice rising. I'm human, okay? I'm trying to make this right. Why can't you give me a chance? A chance. Sarah's voice broke, tears burning her eyes. You had a year of chances, Mark. Every time you went to Denver, every time you lied about a business trip, every time you sent her money from our account, that was your chance to stop. You chose her. You chose your baby with her. Mark's face crumpled, his hands dropping to his sides. For a moment, she thought he might finally admit it, might take responsibility for the pain he'd caused. But then his eyes hardened, a flash of anger breaking through. You're the one destroying us, he said, his voice low, accusing. You went through my emails, called Lila, kicked me out. You're throwing away our marriage, Sarah. Our family. The word family was a knife slicing through her. She thought of their fertility journey, the nights they'd spent dreaming of a child. Emma or Lucas, they'd said, laughing over baby names in this very room. She remembered the miscarriage 2 years ago, Mark holding her as she sobbed, promising they'd try again. They'd been a team, or so she'd thought, united against the heartbreak of empty ultrasounds and negative tests. Now he was building a family with Lila, while blaming her for their collapse. "Don't you dare," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "You destroyed us when you started this. You don't get to play the victim, Mark. Not after everything." She pointed to the hallway, her hand shaking. "Get your things and go. I'm done." Mark stared at her, his eyes wet, his breath uneven. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "You think you can just kick me out? This is my house too. If you push this, Sarah, I'll fight you. In court, whatever it takes. I'm not giving up on us." The threat hit like a cold wave, dousing her anger with fear. A messy divorce, lawyers, courtrooms. She hadn't thought that far, hadn't prepared for the legal battle he was promising. Her resolve wavered, her mind flashing to their wedding day, Mark's grin as he spun her on the dance floor, their vows echoing under a canopy of fairy lights. "You're my home, sunflower." Could she really walk away from that, from 10 years of love, even after his betrayal? But then she saw the ultrasound, Lila's excited voice on the phone, the bank statements draining their dreams. He'd already walked away. She was just making it official. "Get out," she said, her voice steady now, though her heart pounded. "I don't care what you do, Mark. I'm not living with a liar anymore." He stared at her, his face a mix of desperation and defiance, then turned and stormed upstairs. Sarah sank onto the couch, her legs trembling, her breath shallow. The room felt half-empty already, the silence deafening. She heard him upstairs, drawers slamming, the rustle of clothes being stuffed into a bag. Each sound was a step toward freedom, but also a reminder of the life she was losing. She clutched a throw pillow, its soft fabric a small comfort against the ache in her chest. When Mark came back down, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He paused in the doorway. "This isn't over," he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "I love you, Sarah. I'll fight for you." She didn't look at him, didn't trust herself to respond. The door slammed behind him, the sound echoing through the house like a gunshot. Sarah sat there, frozen, her tears falling silently. She felt liberated, like a weight had lifted, but also vulnerable, exposed to a future she couldn't yet see. The house was hers now, but it felt like a stranger's, every corner tainted by Mark's lies. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from the haze. A text from her sister, Rachel. "Mom says you're coming over tonight? Everything okay?" Sarah had called her parents yesterday, her voice shaking as she asked to visit. She hadn't told them why, only that she needed to talk. The thought of confessing Mark's betrayal to her family made her stomach churn, but Emily's words rang in her ears. "You don't have to do this alone." She typed a reply. "I'll be there at 6. It's a lot." The drive to her parents' house was a blur, the Chicago suburbs passing in a haze of autumn leaves and gray skies. Her childhood home was a 2-story colonial, its porch lined with pumpkins, a warm contrast to the cold emptiness of her own house. Her parents, Linda and Tom, greeted her at the door, their smiles fading as they saw her red-rimmed eyes. Rachel was already there, her husband and kids in the living room, the sound of cartoons a jarring backdrop to the tension in Sarah's chest. "Sweetie, what's wrong?" Linda asked, pulling Sarah into a hug. Her mother's lavender perfume was comforting, but it also made Sarah feel small, like a child confessing a mistake. They sat at the dining room table, the same one where Sarah had celebrated birthdays and holidays, where Mark had charmed her family with his easy grin. Rachel poured coffee, her eyes searching Sarah's face. "Spill it," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "You look like hell." Sarah took a deep breath, her hands trembling around her mug. "Mark's been cheating," she said, her voice breaking. "For a year. With a woman in Denver. She's pregnant, and he's been using our savings to pay for her apartment, her medical bills. everything. The room went silent, the cartoons in the background fading to a hum. Linda's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Tom's face hardened, his fists clenching on the table. Rachel reached for Sarah's hand, her grip tight. "Oh my God, Sarah," she whispered. "How could he do this?" Sarah recounted the story, the plane ticket stub, the emails, the ultrasound, the confrontation, the bank statements, and finally, kicking Mark out today. Her voice shook, tears streaming down her face, but she pushed through, needing to unburden herself. Her family listened, their shock turning to anger, their support a lifeline she hadn't realized she needed. "That bastard," Tom said, his voice low, furious. "I trusted him with you, Sarah. He was family." Linda wiped her eyes, her voice trembling. "You poor thing. You've been carrying this alone. Why didn't you tell us sooner?" The pity in her mother's eyes stung, making Sarah feel exposed, like a failure laid bare. She'd always been the strong one, the one who held it together through the miscarriage, the fertility treatments, the endless disappointments. Now, she was the betrayed wife, the one who hadn't seen her husband slipping away. "I was ashamed," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I didn't want you to think I failed." "Failed?" Rachel said, her voice fierce. "Sarah, he failed you. He lied, cheated, stole from you. You're not the one who should be ashamed." Sarah nodded, tears falling into her coffee. Their support was a comfort, but it also made her feel raw, like her pain was on display. She thought of Mark's threat, a messy divorce, a fight in court. What would that look like? Lawyers, public humiliation, dividing the life they'd built. The fear was paralyzing, but so was the thought of staying with him, living with his lies. "You need to see a lawyer," Tom said, his voice firm. "Protect yourself, Sarah. He's already shown he can't be trusted." "I know," Sarah said, her resolve flickering back. "I've been documenting everything. Emails, bank statements, receipts. I'm not letting him take more from me." Linda squeezed her hand, her eyes wet. "You're so strong, honey. We're here for you, whatever you need." The words were meant to uplift, but they deepened Sarah's vulnerability. She wanted to be strong, but she felt fragile, like a cracked vase holding itself together. She thought of their honeymoon, Mark and her laughing on a Cancun beach, the sun warm on their skin. They'd promised forever, and she'd believed it. Now, forever was a courtroom battle, a life without him. Rachel walked her to the car later, her arm around Sarah's shoulders. "Stay with us if you need to," she said. "You don't have to go back to that house alone." Sarah nodded, her throat tight. "Thanks. I just need to figure this out." Driving home, the empty house loomed in her mind, half empty without Mark's things. She felt liberated, having finally stood her ground, but also terrified, the weight of his threat lingering. She was stepping into a new life, one she hadn't chosen, but she wouldn't let Mark's betrayal define her. She'd fight not for him but for herself. The therapist's office was a cocoon of soft light and muted colors, the kind of place designed to feel safe but somehow made Sarah feel exposed. She sat on a plush gray couch, her hands folded in her lap, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. The room smelled faintly of eucalyptus, a diffuser humming in the corner, and a box of tissues sat on the coffee table, an unspoken invitation. Across from her, Dr. Karen Ellis, a woman in her 50s with warm eyes and a calm presence, waited patiently, her notebook resting on her knee. It was Sarah's second session, and the weight of her story. Mark's affair, Lila's pregnancy, the stolen savings, the day she kicked him out, still felt too heavy to unpack. "I don't know where to start," Sarah said, her voice low, her eyes fixed on the abstract painting behind Dr. Ellis. Swirls of blue and green, it reminded her of the lake where she and Mark had spent their first summer, dreaming of a family. The memory stung, a reminder of the life she was losing. "Start where it hurts most," Dr. Ellis said gently, her pen poised but still. "What's keeping you up at night?" Sarah's throat tightened, tears prickling her eyes. "Everything," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Mark's betrayal, the baby he's having with her, the money he took. But mostly it's the fertility stuff. We tried for 3 years and I failed. Now she's pregnant, and it's like she stole my dream." Dr. Ellis nodded, her expression steady, not pitying but understanding. "You feel like your body betrayed you, and now Mark's betrayal has compounded that. Can you tell me more about what that failure feels like?" Sarah hesitated, her hands clenching. She thought of the ovulation kits stacked in her nightstand, the negative pregnancy tests, the miscarriage that had left her hollow. "It's like I'm broken," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I gave everything, my body, my hope, my marriage, and it wasn't enough. Mark was supposed to be with me, but he ran to her. And now they're having what I couldn't." The words spilled out raw and unfiltered, and Sarah's tears fell freely. She grabbed a tissue, her hands shaking. Dr. Ellis leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "Sarah, you didn't fail. Your body isn't broken, and Mark's choices aren't a reflection of your worth. You're grieving a profound loss, not just the marriage but the dream of motherhood. That grief is real, but it doesn't define you." Sarah nodded, wiping her face, the words sinking in slowly. Grief. She hadn't named it before, but it fit. The ache in her chest, the way she woke at 3 a.m., haunted by the ultrasound of Lila's little miracle. Dr. Ellis guided her through the session, asking about her anger, her fear, her hopes for the future. Sarah spoke of kicking Mark out, the threat of a messy divorce, the support of her family, and the shame that still clung to her. For the first time she felt heard, her pain validated without judgment. As she left the office, the November air crisp against her skin, Sarah felt a flicker of hope, fragile but real. Therapy was a lifeline, a place to untangle the knots of her heart, but it wasn't enough. She needed more. People who understood the specific sting of infidelity, who'd walked through the fire and come out stronger. That's why she'd signed up for a support group for betrayed spouses, recommended by Dr. Ellis. Tonight was her first meeting, and the thought of sharing her story with strangers made her stomach churn, but staying alone in her quiet house was worse. The community center was a low brick building, its parking lot dotted with cars, the windows glowing with warm light. Inside, the meeting room was simple. Folding chairs arranged in a circle, a table with coffee and cookies, a whiteboard with "Welcome" scrawled in blue marker. Sarah hesitated at the door, her heart pounding, but a woman with short gray hair and a kind smile waved her in. "You must be Sarah," she said. "I'm Linda, the facilitator. Grab a seat." Sarah nodded, her hands clutching her purse as she chose a chair near the back. The group was small, 8 people, a mix of ages and backgrounds, their faces etched with the same quiet pain she felt. Linda opened the meeting, her voice warm but direct. "This is a safe space," she said. "We share our stories, our struggles, and our victories. No judgment, just support." The first to speak was Javier, a man in his 40s with tired eyes. His wife had cheated with his best friend, and the betrayal had cost him his trust in everyone. "I still check her phone," he admitted, his voice thick. "Even after she moved out, I'm paranoid." Sarah's heart ached, his words mirroring her own late-night spirals, the way she'd scoured Mark's emails for more lies. Next was Mia, a young woman with a sharp laugh that hid her pain. Her fiancé had left her for a coworker, and she'd found out at their engagement party. "I threw his ring in the lake," she said, a wry smile breaking through. Felt good for about 5 minutes. The group chuckled, and Sarah felt a small release, a reminder that pain could coexist with resilience. When it was her turn, Sarah's mouth went dry, her hands trembling. "I'm Sarah," she said, her voice barely audible. "My husband, Mark, cheated for a year with a woman in Denver. She's pregnant, and he used our savings to pay for her life. I kicked him out last week, but I'm still a mess." The group nodded, their eyes kind, not pitying but knowing. Linda leaned forward. "That's a lot to carry, Sarah. How are you feeling right now?" "Angry," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. "Betrayed. But also lost. We were trying for a baby, and now he's having one with her. It's like he took everything I wanted." A woman across the circle, Claire, spoke up, her voice soft. My ex did something similar. He had a kid with his mistress. It's like they steal your future, you know? But you're here, Sarah. That's a start. Sarah nodded, tears prickling her eyes. The shared stories were a mirror, reflecting her pain but also her potential for healing. Javier spoke of rebuilding trust, Mia of rediscovering her passions, Claire of finding peace in forgiveness, not for her ex but for herself. Sarah listened, her heart opening to the possibility that she could redefine herself, not as Mark's wife or a failed mother, but as Sarah, whole and enough. Driving home, the city lights blurred through her tears, but they weren't just from pain. There was hope too, a seed taking root. Her house was quiet, the absence of Mark's things a stark reminder of her new reality. The living room, once filled with their laughter, now held only her footsteps, echoing on the hardwood. She set her purse on the counter, her phone buzzing with a new email. Her heart sank when she saw the sender, Mark. "Sarah, please read this," the subject line read. She hesitated, her finger hovering over the delete button, but curiosity, or maybe weakness, won out. The email was long, his words dripping with desperation. "I'm so sorry, Sunflower. I know I messed up, but I love you. Lila's pregnancy changes nothing. I want you, our life. Can we talk? I'm staying at a hotel, but I'll come home anytime. Please don't give up on us." Her chest tightened. His words reopening wounds she'd just begun to close. She thought of their first date, Mark spinning her on a dance floor, his grin bright under the stars. They'd been so in love, so sure of their future. Even after the miscarriage, he'd held her, promising they'd try again. Now, his apologies felt like manipulation, a way to pull her back into his lies. She deleted the email, her hands shaking, but her phone buzzed again, a text. "I miss you, Sarah. Just one conversation. Please." She dropped the phone, her breath shallow. The support group's stories echoed in her mind. Javier's paranoia, Mia's defiance, Claire's peace. They'd all faced this moment, the pull of an ex's pleas, and they'd chosen themselves. Sarah wanted to do the same, but Mark's persistence tested her resolve. What if he was sincere? What if she was throwing away a chance to fix things? The doubt was a familiar enemy, but Dr. Ellis's words cut through. "His choices aren't a reflection of your worth." She blocked his number, her heart pounding, a small act of defiance that felt monumental. The house was still quiet, but it was hers now, a space to rebuild. She walked to the spare room, the one meant for a nursery, its walls bare and waiting. For the first time, she didn't see it as a failure, but as a canvas. Maybe for an art studio, a place to revive her graphic design dreams, abandoned during the fertility years. The thought was tentative, but it sparked something new, a vision of a life defined by her, not Mark. Later, she sat at the kitchen table, a sketch pad open, her pencils scattered. She hadn't drawn in years, but the act felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. Her phone buzzed again. An email from a new account Mark had created. "I'm not giving up, Sarah. I'll wait as long as it takes." She didn't open it, didn't let his words in. Instead, she sketched, her lines bold and unsteady, a reflection of her heart. The support group's next meeting was in a week, and Sarah already looked forward to it, to the shared strength of people who understood. Therapy would continue, a space to process her grief and anger. Mark's messages would keep coming, she knew, but each time she ignored them, her boundaries grew stronger. She wasn't whole yet, maybe she never would be, but she was rebuilding, brick by brick, a life that was hers alone. The lawyer's office was all sharp angles and polished surfaces, the kind of place that felt more like a transaction than a sanctuary. Sarah sat at a sleek mahogany table, her hands folded around a pen, the divorce papers spread before her like a map to a new life. The air smelled of leather and ink, the hum of a printer in the corner, a quiet reminder of the finality she was about to embrace. Across from her, Ms. Harper, a no-nonsense attorney with silver-streaked hair, reviewed the documents, her glasses perched on her nose. "Everything's in order," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Once you sign, we'll file with the court. Mark's been served, and we'll handle his response." Sarah nodded, her throat tight. The pen felt heavy, a small but monumental weight. It was early December, 6 weeks since she'd kicked Mark out, and the house had become a ghost of their 7-year marriage, every corner haunted by his betrayal. Lila's ultrasound, the stolen savings, the emails that had unraveled her world. She'd moved out last week, renting a small apartment downtown, unable to stay in a space that echoed with lies. Signing these papers was the last step in severing her ties to Mark, but it wasn't just relief she felt. There was sadness, too, a quiet grief for the life she'd dreamed of. She thought of their wedding day, Mark's crooked grin as he slipped the ring on her finger, their vows whispered under a canopy of fairy lights. "You're my home, sunflower," he'd said, and she'd believed him, believed in their future of kids and road trips and lazy Sundays. Even through the miscarriage, the fertility treatments, the endless disappointments, she'd held on to that promise. Now it was ash, scattered by his year-long affair with Lila, the baby he was having with her, the savings he'd drained to fund their life. She took a deep breath, her hand steadying, and signed her name. Sarah Elizabeth Thompson, soon to be just Sarah Elizabeth again. Relief washed over her, mingled with a pang of loss, like letting go of a lifeline that had been fraying for years. "Thank you," Sarah said, sliding the papers back to Ms. Harper. Her voice was soft but resolute, a reflection of the strength she'd fought to reclaim. Ms. Harper smiled, a rare warmth breaking through her professionalism. "You're doing the right thing, Sarah. This is a fresh start. You're stronger than you know." Sarah nodded, her eyes stinging. She left the office, the winter air sharp against her skin, the Chicago streets bustling with holiday shoppers and twinkling lights. She felt lighter, unburdened, but also untethered, like a boat drifting from shore. The divorce wasn't final yet. Mark's threat of a messy court battle loomed, but signing those papers was a declaration of her independence, a vow to herself that she wouldn't let his betrayal define her. Her new apartment was a small one-bedroom in a brick building near the river, its walls bare but full of possibility. She'd spent the weekend unpacking, her furniture a mix of old pieces from the house and new finds, a cozy armchair, a bright rug, a desk for her laptop. The space smelled of fresh paint and coffee, a stark contrast to the stale memories of her old home. She'd left behind the fertility books, the ovulation kits, the spare room meant for a nursery. This apartment was hers, a canvas for a life she was just beginning to imagine. That evening, Sarah sat at her desk, her laptop open to a website for a local community college. She'd enrolled in a photography course, a passion she'd abandoned during the fertility years, when every spare moment was consumed by doctor's appointments and hope. She remembered the summer she'd met Mark, her camera always in hand, capturing sunsets and city streets. His laughter as she framed him against the skyline. Photography had been her joy, her voice, and now it felt like a way to reclaim herself, to see the world through her own lens again. She clicked register, her heart fluttering with a mix of excitement and fear. It was a small step, but it was hers. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from the moment. An email from an unfamiliar address. lila.martin92@gmail.com. Sarah's breath caught, her hand freezing on the mouse. Lila. The name still stung, conjuring the ultrasound, the Instagram photos, the life Mark had built with her. Sarah hadn't heard from her since the furious text weeks ago, when Lila had cut contact with Mark after learning he was married. Why was she reaching out now? Part of Sarah wanted to delete the email, to keep Lila in the past, but another part, the part that had pitted Lila's naivety, her own betrayal by Mark, needed to know. She opened the email, her heart pounding. "Sarah," it began, "I owe you an apology. I didn't know you existed until you told me. Mark lied to me, said he was separated, and I believed him. I'm so sorry for the pain I caused you. I'm raising my baby alone now, and I've cut Mark out of my life. If you're willing, I'd like to meet, to apologize in person. No pressure, but I'm in Chicago next week. Let me know." Sarah leaned back, her chest tight. Lila's words were sincere, raw, a mirror to her own pain. She pictured Lila in Denver, alone with her pregnancy, grappling with the same betrayal Sarah had faced. The anger she'd felt toward Lila had faded, replaced by a shared sense of loss. Mark had manipulated them both, spinning lies to keep them apart, and Lila's apology felt like a bridge, a chance for closure. Sarah typed a reply, her fingers trembling. I appreciate your apology. I'm open to meeting. Let's talk next week. She hit send, her heart racing, unsure if she was ready but certain she needed this. The following week, Sarah sat on a bench in a small park near her apartment, the winter sun low and pale, the air crisp with the promise of snow. Bare trees stretched overhead, their branches stark against the gray sky, a fitting backdrop for the meeting she was about to have. Her hands were tucked into her coat pockets, her camera bag beside her. She'd started carrying it again, snapping photos of the city, rediscovering her eye. The photography course had begun, and each class was a spark, a reminder of who she'd been before Mark, before the fertility struggles, before the betrayal. Lila approached, her auburn hair catching the light, her green eyes wary but kind. She was visibly pregnant now, her coat stretched over a small bump, and the sight hit Sarah like a wave, a reminder of the ultrasound, the little miracle that wasn't hers. But Lila's face was open, not defiant, and Sarah saw her own pain reflected there. A woman betrayed, left to pick up the pieces. Sarah, Lila said, her voice soft, hesitant. She stopped a few feet away, her hands clasped in front of her. Sarah nodded, standing, her heart pounding. Lila, thanks for coming. They sat on the bench, an awkward silence settling between them. Lila spoke first, her voice trembling. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I had no idea he was married. He told me you were separated, that the divorce was almost final. I believed him because I wanted to. I was an idiot. Sarah's throat tightened, tears prickling her eyes. You weren't an idiot, she said, her voice steady. He lied to both of us. He made you think you had a future with him, just like he made me think we were trying for a family. We were both his victims. Lila's eyes filled with tears, her hands resting on her bump. I cut him off after you told me, she said. He tried to call to explain, but I blocked him. I'm doing this alone now, raising the baby. It's scary, but I'd rather do it without him than with a liar. Sarah nodded, a mix of pity and admiration stirring in her chest. Lila's strength, her choice to walk away, mirrored her own. I'm sorry you're going through this, Sarah said. It's not fair what he did to you. To us. Lila wiped her eyes, a small smile breaking through. You're kinder than I deserve. I thought you'd hate me. I did, Sarah admitted, her voice soft. For a while. But you didn't know. You were trying to build a life just like I was. Forgive you, Lila. I hope you can find peace. Lila's tears fell freely, her hand reaching for Sarah's. Thank you, she whispered. That means more than you know. They sat in silence, the park quiet around them, the weight of their shared pain lifting slightly. Sarah felt a strange peace, a closure she hadn't expected. Forgiving Lila was a gift to herself, a way to let go of the anger that had anchored her to Mark's betrayal. But Mark, she couldn't forgive him, not now, maybe not ever. His lies, his manipulation, the way he'd stolen their dreams for another life, they were wounds too deep to heal. She chose to move forward without him, her heart lighter for it. Lila left after a few minutes, promising to keep in touch, and Sarah stayed on the bench, her camera in her hands. She snapped a photo of the bare trees, the light filtering through, a moment of beauty in the starkness. It was a metaphor for her life now, stripped bare but still holding possibility. Back at her apartment, Sarah opened her sketchbook, her pencils scattered across the desk. She'd been drawing again alongside her photography, her old passions rekindling like embers. The divorce papers were filed, her course was underway, and her support group met weekly, their stories a reminder of her resilience. Mark's emails had stopped. His silence a small victory after she'd blocked his new accounts. She was rebuilding, not the life she'd planned with him, but a new one defined by her own dreams. She thought of their honeymoon, Mark and her on a Cancun beach, the waves warm against their toes. That Sarah had been full of hope, unaware of the pain to come. But this Sarah, scarred but standing, was stronger, her heart open to a future she could shape. She closed her sketchbook, a smile tugging at her lips, and looked out the window at the city lights. For the first time in months she felt ready. Not whole but hopeful, a woman moving forward, one brave step at a time.